Church on the Way to Work. Art by Mieke Uhryniuk-Smith. Story by Brandon Ostrom. I was walking downtown on my way to work one bright, clear summer morning, my head a grim cloud of thoughts about work and life that often seems to hang about me these days, when I heard it. A kind of religious singing. The sort where people stand around in the pews holding the hymnals and droning on about something they're hardly paying attention to. But this was different. It was powerful. I can't think of any other word for it. And even though I couldn't pick out so much as a single word of what was being sung, it was just so haunting and so beautiful that I had to find out more about it. I found the source about a block away, coming from the open doors of a church that was sandwiched between a convenience store and a tobacco shop. It looked so out of place, I felt that it was something of a minor miracle I hadn't noticed it until that day. It was about 2 stories tall, maybe 15 feet across, and it was made of these large, weathered grey stone blocks, and it reminded me of all those famous old churches you see all over Europe. Except it wasn't enough to say it was old. This was more like ancient. Standing at the entrance with that strange music washing over me, it was like standing at the foot of the pyramids, or the Tower of Jericho. I found a good-sized collection of shoes and coats in the foyer when I made my way inside, but where I'd expect to find a large gathering within the main area, either for some middle-of-the-week ceremony or just a group rehearsing for some upcoming service, to my surprise, it was empty. It was the kind of grand hugeness you expect of a place like that. Row after row of pews, maybe enough seating for 200 or 300 people. There were heavy-looking banners everywhere hanging down from the walls with religious symbols I didn't recognize, and stained glass windows depicting grim stylized scenes from some unknown war. 2 groups of people, one in black armor, the other gray, each wielding swords and spears pointed at each other. The side in black seemed to be depicted as the winner in most of these. As for the apparently sourceless singing, I felt it had to be getting piped in by the speakers or something. But having taken the whole place in, the idea of speakers in a place like that seemed ridiculous, like a caveman with a cell phone. I hadn't seen so much as a single electric light or wall socket. It was only when I'd walked right up to the rear of the church that I found anyone. There was a small, bald man with round glasses tucked away in the corner to one side of the hall. He was sitting on a chair beside a tall door made out of banded wood, of the sort that seemed more at home in a castle than a church. He was wearing these black, velvety-looking robes, and he was reading a magazine. He looked up when I approached him, and smiled a tired, disinterested smile, then asked if I wanted to join the ceremony downstairs. He gestured to the door with his head. By that point, once I'd reached the back of the church, the singing was very loud. I'd been to a few heavy metal concerts when I was younger. It reminded me of that. Not that it was deafening, but by that point, it was like I felt it as much as heard it. That I felt it in my bones. And standing there, it was more than just my wanting to find out about the singing or chanting or whatever it was. It was like I had to. There was a pull to it that was almost magnetic, like I was a little iron filing, and I just had to get through that door and get to where I needed to go. When I told him that I wanted to go down, he set his magazine aside, reached under the chair, and handed me a folded pile of black cloth that turned out to be the same kind of robe he was wearing. He didn't say anything to me by that point. I just got out of my clothes and slipped the robe on over my head, right then and there. And then the 2 of us stepped through the door and we found ourselves at the top of a winding stone staircase. My host, I hadn't thought to ask his name, then grabbed up a burning torch from where it was hanging on the wall and guided us downwards. As we made our way down the stairs, he told me about the history of the building to pass the time. He explained that it had been built in the early 1600s by a group of immigrants who'd come to the country to escape persecution for their faith. The founders of the church had apparently been wealthy and successful, he said, but that the ignorant masses had grown jealous of their power and influence and had hounded them across Europe for centuries. After this had gone on for a long while, when eventually nearly every monument and sacred building of theirs had been torn down by the mobs that seemed to pursue them wherever they went, the founders took the last ones still standing, the very building we are descending below, and piled as much of it as they could stone by stone into every ship they owned, an entire fleet, or so he said, and carted it across the North Atlantic Ocean and rebuilt it here. Long before any other major settlement, long before this country even had a name. The bald man related all of this to me with the robotic drone of someone reading out of a book. That, along with the leaden way he walked, It all seemed like a well-worn habit, a bit like a tour guide, as if he'd been doing this, guiding complete strangers down this medieval-looking staircase for years now, and didn't think anything of it. It took us almost 10 minutes to reach the bottom. The staircase terminated in front of a set of large iron-banded doors set into the bare rock. My host ushered me through these wordlessly, then closed them behind me once I was through, and suddenly I was there, at last at the source of the singing. I found myself in a room as wide as a school bus and at least as deep. There looked to be between 50 and 100 people there, all dressed in the same black robes I was wearing, and all of them were facing the opposite end of the cave, where the ceiling tapered upwards high above us. Now that I was there, now that I was right inside the source, the singing seemed ethereal. It was a collection of broad, dissonant harmonies in a language that sounded like a mix of Italian and German, without being either. I found myself joining in almost without my own volition. I didn't know these words or what they meant, but I tried to copy what I heard, for some reason convinced, even now I'm still not sure why, that if I did that long enough, their meaning would come to me, that all would somehow be revealed. I noticed a small group on the other side of the room hauling on this heavy-looking rope, set high up into the ceiling above us, and eventually this naked woman with bright orange hair trailing past her shoulders was pulled up off the floor by a noose they'd tied around her neck. She didn't flail or cry out as the rope bit into her neck. I felt certain she had to be dead, but her eyes were wide open and staring straight forward. Maybe at me. Maybe at the crowd gathered there. I didn't know. As we sang, one of the people who'd hauled her up took this wicked-looking knife and cut her open from below her sternum to just above her pubic bone. When that was done, he stepped back and two others went to either side of her and peeled back the flaps of her skin like they were opening the cover of a book. But there was no blood, not so much as a single drop. And when I looked inside her, there was just darkness. Not black, but a void, an absence. There was no sense of shape or depth. It was as if someone had torn a hole in the fabric of the universe through her, and I was looking through an opening into that gaping mouth of infinity. I don't know how long we all stood there like that for, singing that haunting, ethereal music, transfixed by this impossible sight. It must have been an hour, maybe less. But eventually the woman was lowered back down, and after that we all fell silent. Then, one after another, we filed out of the room, and then back up the winding stairs. Once I'd returned to the main floor, I found my clothes on the pews where I'd left them, and dressed along with the others. As I did that, I saw the girl with the orange hair smiling and talking with two others from our group. She'd slipped into a beige tank top and shorts, like she was just about to go out for a run. There was a dark red circle under her neck that looked raw and painful. Afterwards, I had lunch in a nearby park to the sounds of twittering birds and children laughing. Summer was in full swing, and it was a gorgeous day. The trees in the park were full and lush, a rich, vibrant green that felt so alive. I went home soon after, and the rest of my day passed just like that. Peaceful,